Hi guys, so today we are going to do a review. It's not going to be as epic as I thought it would be. It's just going to be a not too long of a review of Conversations with Nostradamus Volume 1 by Dolores Cannon. And we're just going to get right into it. This is the book. This is the version I got. I know there's another version. I don't even know if this is the revised edition or not. And then the back looks like this. And the spine looks like that. Okay. So before I even get into it, I have to say, because I didn't write it down, one of the prophecies that Nostradamus has was that the Olympic Games that we have now eventually turn into something like, I would say like the Hunger Games, but he said it more like the Colosseum in Rome, like those fighting to the death type of competitions or battles, whatever they were, that's what it's going to be more like in the future. I don't know what makes it like that, but that's one of his predictions. Also, to clarify, not everything is all doom and gloom in this book. A lot of it is actually, but a lot of it we can change by you know, just shifting our choices and making better choices individually and as a collective. And the way they're talking to Nostradamus is basically kind of like how I thought they were going to. Sorry if I keep clearing my throat, because I was sick. So basically, Dolores Cannon, this is going on in like the late 1980s, like 1985, while she's writing this. She's using two different vehicles. The first vehicle was basically the bridge to the other vehicle to communicate the rest of the quatrains or prophecies. I don't know if I'm saying it right, quatrains that Nostradamus wrote. He said one of the main reasons that he made it so difficult for his prophecies to be revealed was because, first of all, because of the Inquisition. They were going to kill him if they understood what he was writing, and it would have gotten burned and would have never made it to our time period. Also, a lot of people thought he was like doing witchcraft and all this stuff because he was a doctor and basically used hypnosis to because there was no like anesthesia back then, and he would use like hypnosis to tell the subconscious to not feel pain while procedures were being done. And he would try to do it secretly, and it would be kind of tricky because there would obviously always be more doctors there. But basically, he has this mirror that was given to him by an extra dimensional being. Don't know who it was, but they gave him like an interdimensional or ultra dimensional mirror to communicate with the future. And that's how he was, one of the ways he was communicating with us. The way he was communicating with Dolores Cannon was kind of through that way, but also through, he would go into meditation and he would visit this very misty, foggy space where like space and time didn't exist or something like that. I don't know what dimension it was or what plane it was or reality it was, but it was a point in outside of time or space, I don't know, where he was able to communicate wherever he was in 1500s in France to 1985 with Dolores Cannon. And one of the things he states, I know this is such a long introduction, but it's because we're going to get right into the prophecies. One of the things he states is that he would never channel through someone. Like, for example, like if I'm a channeler, for example, and I channel Nostradamus, like he would never do that, he said, but he would always do it through like a two-way, like he would use a vehicle to give the information to and then relay it to someone else, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. I know it's kind of the same thing, but like not really. Yeah, he said anybody that says that they actually channel themselves, Nostradamus, they're a liar. That's what he says, and that's what he says. And then he's also tried to communicate with people in the far future, and then he also communicates with I think he communicates with like the Greys or other extra dimensional beings, because he's such he is like one of the greatest prophets. Is that what you call it? Like, or fortune tellers. He's one of the greatest, like, future seers. I don't know what do you call it. That even the extra dimensional beings that are probably like fourth or fifth dimensional ask for his prophecies and guidance, because he's that good. He even channels, he sees their futures as well. And once again, because all of our futures are tied together, so of course it's important for all of that to work out correctly. Anyways, so I don't even know how to read these, but these quatrains are separated into centuries. So I think it goes like this: century 3-92. I think I'm just gonna read it like that. So there's obviously like hundreds of quatrains in the book. All of them I did not resonate with. I mean, most of them I did not resonate with because a lot of them already happened. We're in 2022, a lot of this stuff already happened. But every time, I wanted to let you know that in the book he talked about the Antichrist so many times, and I know that thought is like so scary. I've always been scared of that term. It just sounds so like evil. I don't know what it is about it, but it is evil. But you would think there'd be more Antichrist. According to Nostradamus, there's only 3, and the third one is the one that's right now currently living in this planet. The first one is, this is all according to Nostradamus, the first one was Napoleon, and then the second one was Hitler. Okay, and then the third one is, I don't even know, he didn't even give a name, but it's someone in the other side of the world. I don't want to say where it is because I don't want it to be offensive if I zoom in on where it's at. Okay, century 392. The world is near its final period. Saturn will again be late on his return. The empire will shift towards the broad nation, an eye at Narbonne, plucked out by a Goshawk. I totally butchered all of that, sorry. So this was explained in like 4 pages, and I'm cutting it short for you guys. So long explanation cut short, this event happens near the end of World War III. Saturn is in retrograde at the time. In this war, the scientists are researching how to warp and alter time to help change some events to swing the war in their favor. That kind of sounds like what's happening right now at CERN. This vortex they end up creating rips them apart because they don't understand the powers that they're dealing with here. The countries involved in this war are the Northern Hemisphere, and the piece of the Southern Hemisphere that is involved is in Ireland. Also, I have to include, sorry, I'm like all over the place. One more thing I have to include is that the reason he's contacting Dolores Cannon is because she was a vehicle that would be able to distribute this information to a lot of people. So she was like the perfect, she wasn't the vehicle, but she was the perfect, I guess, messenger. No, not messenger, but like deliverer of the message. Because Nostradamus says all of his explained prophecies that other people have interpreted are all wrong, and that this is that he had to do this form of communication so that a lot of these futures could be prevented, or hopefully prevented, or be not so destructive. If we're aware of them beforehand, it prevents a bigger chaos, if that makes sense. Century 540-43. The great ruin of the clergy is not far off. Provence, Naples, Sicily, Sees and Pons. In Germany at the Rhine and Cologne, vexed to death by those of Maine. So, I'm basically reading what the book says, so if it sounds weird. He has mentioned to you before how this man will destroy the cultural centers of Western Europe to help the people, and that he will try to help to level the 7 hills of Rome. Another thing he will do in the process of all this destruction is to ransack the Vatican totally to the ground and destroy the library. He will do this mainly to undermine the authority and break up into little pieces the Catholic Church, for that will be a major obstacle in his plans. One way he will do this is by revealing all the controversial things he finds that are hidden away in the Vatican library. Things the Church has declared people should not read, for it would be threatening to their faith. He will be sure that these things are distributed about. It will cause much dissension with the Church. Theologians And priests and students will turn one against the other, each with their own theories and interpretations concerning this new information. And all will be confusion. That way, the Catholic Church will no longer pose the obstacle that it did before this man and his plans. When Nostradamus said the Antichrist would ransack the Vatican library and steal important documents relating to the church, I wondered how this would be possible. Then it occurred to me that if this last pope were a tool of the Antichrist, he might allow him entry into the most sacred and secret archives. This would explain the treachery the pope might do to cause the downfall of the church. The Vatican would not be aware that the what is that word? Was within their midst in the highest office until after the terrible event had taken place. There was another quatrain about the United Nations coming to an end as well due to the Antichrist. And a lot of the stuff that deals with the Antichrist, it's so weird because you would think it's kind of like good against evil, but it's kind of like, it's very weird. It's like evil against evil. So basically what I mean by that is like he tries to form alliances with these evil governments, evil societies and stuff like that, like the Illuminati and all these people. He's like outside of it, by the way. He's outside of that. He tries to form alliances with all the corrupt beings and all this stuff, only for then later to betray them. And then it like kind of backfires on him in the end, like in the far future, because those people were the ones that set up everything that he wants to do, if that makes sense. He also mentioned that the Antichrist plans to do where Hitler went wrong. He is trying to be better than Hitler. I mean, be worse than Hitler. You know what I mean? He's trying to be a crazier dictator than him. It seems to me that a lot of these predictions pertain to many different events. I wondered if maybe he was seeing various possibilities that could happen and that they might not all necessarily come true. He says the main reason why he wanted this communication was to avoid the worst of what he's seen. Some of the so-called worst-case scenarios could very easily take place, but with great determination and resolve, they could be altered for the better. Unfortunately, at this time, the worst things that he has seen would be the easiest events to happen, and he knows he must try his best to help lessen the destruction. He once said that sometimes he saw a nexus in time, and there could be many different paths, and therefore many possibilities. This is correct. He says at this point, since it is such a major nexus, no matter which path we choose, it still seems to contain most of these visions. But there are other paths where various amounts of these could be avoided. He says the time of troubles will be a very trying and difficult time. The spirits on the earth at this time are here because they chose to be here. Because they knew that any spirit on the earth at this time will be working through large amounts of major karma. He's showing me a picture. He's not giving me words, but it's a great karmic wheel divided up into larger sections instead of smaller sections, and there are people working off these larger sections as if they were the smaller sections. It's like working off concentrated karma. He says the amount of karma the spirits who live through these times will be able to work off would be the equivalent of 10 lifetimes at any other time in Earth history. Is that why he thinks they volunteer to come back at this time? He says many of them did volunteer, such as your older and more advanced spirits, who are needed here to help everybody pull through. There are also some younger spirits here at this time who are just simply feeling adventuresome. However, there are some spirits who are here not necessarily because they wanted to come in their hearts, but because they knew that they had to, or it would be the end of the line for them, so far as spiritual development goes. So they're not fully volunteers, but just enforced volunteers, so to speak, because they knew they had no other choice. I think those kind of people would be unhappy here. He says they are, but some of them manage to make the best of the situation, and some don't, and that's their choice to make. Century 4-28. When Venus will be covered by the sun under the splen, dirt will be hidden of form. Mercury will have exposed them to the fire, by a rumor of war will be affronted. So, he says the other interpretation has to do with an event dealing with the kind of troubles that are to come near the end of this millennium. In this time of troubles, there will be many confusing things taking place. He says in this interpretation, the quatrain holds a number of astrological references. He is complaining of my own personal ignorance at this point. He's having difficulty putting across the concepts in a way I can understand them and communicate them to you. Tell him to do the best he can. He says he's doing an excellent job, and it's my denseness that's in the way. Unfortunately, the astrological connotations he's using here are not any good for dating this, but he will try to get to that in a moment. During the time of troubles, at a point where the sun is between the Earth and Venus, and thus from the Earth's point of view, Venus will appear to be hidden by the sun, there will be a visitation from the Watchers, those who have kept an eye on mankind's development. They will approach from the direction of Venus, so they too will be temporarily hidden by the sun. But they will be exposed through the powers of Mercury, that is, through the powers of observation and communication. The scientists who are involved with radiotelescopy and its similar disciplines will find an anomaly that will catch their attention. As they study it, they will come to the realization of a strong indication of what they would have referred to as a UFO. This is actually the instrument used by the Watchers to observe mankind. As this instrument comes closer to the Earth for more observations, the scientists expose the instrument to the fire. In other words, expose it to the light of knowledge. They will find out more about what it is and who the Watchers are when this event takes place. However, as it will be during the time of troubles, this definite proof that there are others out there in the universe will cause great social unrest and panic in some countries that are particularly involved with wars and such. And there will be internal dissension created by fundamentalists whose worldview cannot include others in the universe without profoundly shaking their beliefs. He realizes the measurement of Venus being on the other side of the sun from Earth is not too helpful for dating, as this occurs quite often, but he says from his point of view it feels like this will take place in either 1997 or 1998. I immediately thought of the Phoenix Lights when he said this, because that occurred in, 1997? Century 2-18. News. Unexpected and heavy rain will suddenly prevent two armies. Stones and fire from the skies will make a sea of stones. The death of the seven suddenly by land and sea. So, he says this refers to events during the time of the Antichrist. Once again, with the earth changes taking place, there will be extremes of weather. He says two armies will be lined up, ready to go to battle, and an extreme weather change, or rain and hail, will take them by surprise. It will prevent them from being able to make contact the way they had planned, so they'll turn to an alternative plan and fly planes up above the weather to try to drop bombs on the opposing forces. This is what he means by fire and stones falling from the sky. What does he mean by the death of the seven? He says there will be a cabal of leaders. They won't be military in the strict sense, but more like financiers and bankers, the powers behind the military pulling the strings. Somehow, through the espionage powers of the Antichrist, they will be discovered and destroyed, which on the one hand would help the Antichrist because it will throw the organizations he's opposing into temporary disorder and he can take advantage of this chaos. But on the other hand, it's a little bit short-sighted of him because it's this cabal that has been instigating the warfare that has been going on through the decades and centuries. His destroying them will in effect write the beginning of the end for him because it's the activities of this cabal that have supported what he's trying to do. But now they're removed, so the agitation for world war is not there, and the natural inclination for world peace will start to assert itself, thereby doing away with the Antichrist. Wasn't he aware of this? No. If he had known, he would have used them instead. All he knew at the time was that they were financing these European forces so they could continue to fight against him. In several other places in the quatrains, there are shadowy secret people mentioned. Do these also have something to do with these mysterious cabal? In 5-75, which is translated in chapter 11, the present time, a man in the United States is mentioned. A man who is very wealthy. He's wealthy to the point that anything he wants done can get done instantaneously, for he has the money to get it accomplished. He says this man will be well known and famous because of his wealth, but his true mission in life will be secret, for this man will be a fanatic of sorts. He will be involved with such organizations as the American Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan. This man's sole ambition in life is the overthrow of the American government as it is presently constituted in the 20th century. This man, naturally enough, will also be involved in politics. But even though his main ambition is to change the form of the American government, he has to stay low-key in politics so he may continue spinning his web of power, continue making new contacts, and expanding his range of influence. He has been very sly and very careful. He will be in the center of the entire organization, but he won't be the figure of power that people see. He will have a figurehead, someone who will appear to be the one in power, but he will be pulling the strings. He will be behind this person, being the true boss. In 10-72, translated in chapter 19, Experimentation, the King of Terror, is mentioned in connection with the genetic experiment. He says the person who is in overall charge of this project is so powerful he's able to affect and influence policy decisions made in various countries. He's like the power behind the throne, and everyone's afraid of him. So he's the real king rather than the leaders. He says there's a possibility you may have heard his name in a different connection, but highly unlikely. This person is very secretive, and nobody is aware of the power he wields. Also in that same chapter, another mysterious power group is mentioned in 1-81. This one is also referring to the genetic experiments. These 9 scientists will be known to the world at large because they will be the ones in charge. Meanwhile, the others behind the scenes have refuge given by sympathetic backers, men of wealth and power. Could these all be independent references to the same mysterious cabal that really controls the affairs of the world? Now this section is towards the very far future, and from someone this is happening in 1985, the very far future could be in our present time for all we know. But it says here, century 10-74, the year of the great 7th number accomplished. It will appear at the time of the games of slaughter, not far from the age of the great millennium when the dead will come out of their graves. So he says this refers to when the end of the world is approaching. He says the entire age of the world could be divided into 7 great portions. The first 6 of these have been experienced and fulfilled, and we're in the 7th portion now. He says the 7th portion of these ages has to do with man and his doings. At the end of this age will be the end of the age of mankind, after this 7th age is accomplished. Although the earth will continue to exist for a few ages after that, man will have served his purpose and accomplished what he needed to do here on earth. He will be elsewhere instead, and the will of karma will no longer send men to earth, but to other locations. This sounded very similar to what Phil said in my book, The Keepers of the Garden, about the future. But this is not going to happen soon, is it? He says no. When writing quatrains on karmic matters, one has to take into effect the great will of the universe and the slowness with which it moves. So far as the universe is concerned, it might appear that it's going to happen soon, but that's only in relation to the great age of the universe. When it comes to the brief spans of man's lives, it will seem to be far in the future. That's a relief. What does he mean by it will appear at the time of the games of slaughter? He says that, I actually did write it. He says that between now and then, civilization will have fallen down and been rebuilt several times. Some of the traditions and conventions of the former civilizations will survive and be passed down, but each time this happens, they will be perverted a little bit more. He says the games of slaughter of that time stem directly from the Olympic Games of your time. This regular meeting every 4 years of all the nations to perform these sports events will gradually, through the succession of civilizations with intervening periods of savagery, be perverted into something resembling the gladiatorial games of ancient Rome. He says it's just simply another natural example of the circle of time. The games started out in athletic form in ancient Greece, became perverted to violence in ancient Rome, and then when the games were reinstated, it was of sports orientation again. But once more in the far future, they will become perverted into violence and bloodshed. Maybe I'm beginning to think a little bit like him, because I picked up on the connection with the gladiatorial games, and by the dead will come out of their graves, he's referring to the transfer of their souls elsewhere from this planet. Also, this made me think, what if Suzanne Collins was channeling a timeline in our future, like a potential timeline in our future where that is our reality? That dystopian world is a reality that we do experience, most likely not in our generation or our lifetime, but maybe like, I don't know what you would say, like our grandkids' this generation or something like that. We don't know. Hopefully not, but you never know. He says there will be a base established on the moon It will be a major center of communication and scientific research. During this time, the space's major purpose will be for developing freestanding space stations, meaning independent of everything and everybody else. I think he's meaning self-sufficient, so I'm substituting that more modern term. Did he call them space stations, or is that your interpretation? Well, he didn't call them anything. He pictured them. They have various shapes. Some are cylindrical, some are conical, and some spherical. All of them have large solar sails attached to provide them with the energy they need. He says the moon base will be developing and building these space stations. After a period of time of doing this, the major impetus of growth will move to the space stations. That's where the main central work for the trade and the industries will be. So the moon will not have such a major place in the scheme of things anymore. It will remain the nexus of communications, but the scientific research and the industry and such will move out to the space stations. And Earth will enter a major period of prosperity and growth because there will be room to grow and enough for everybody. Things will be basically peaceful if Earth manages to avoid certain bad decisions that could lead to war, and if Earth updates her civil laws so there won't be so much grassroots unrest. He says this period of space exploration and living, this period will last for a very long time, very easily 7,000 years, if not more. He says once again he had to combine 2 prophecies into 1 quatrain, which he does a lot. They have interpreted this as having to do with the date of the publication of his quatrains and the completion of his prophecies. They thought he meant it would be 7,000 years till the end of the world. The translator says it was a commonly held theory in the Middle Ages that the world would come to an end in the beginning of the 7th millennium. This information originated from the Book of Enoch, which was general reading in the 1st and 2nd centuries, but was removed by the church from the Holy Scriptures. Does he have any comment on that? He kind of quirks his eyebrow at this point and says that is a reasonable assumption, but he says the tool that I use is not always reasonable, and at this point he gives me a picture of that mirror. So, I added a little note here that I have to say that although this book does talk about a lot of bad prophecies, Nostradamus points out that any event in history can never just be all bad or all good. Yes, there's going to be terrible times, but good times will happen again to balance it out. That is the way the universe works. We're going through really, really good times, and then we have really, really bad times, and then we have really, really good times, and then we have really, really bad times. It's just like with everyone's life. It's just literally everyone's life, no matter who you are, what you are, how wealthy you are, or how much good luck you have. There's going to be good and bad stuff. Even if you're one of those special people that are completely protected by a bubble of light from even creating karma on this planet, like from Dolores Cannon's readings, like you're still going to have good and bad stuff. Even if you're not accumulating karma, like you still have good and bad stuff in your life. Like it's the way of the universe. Like you just exist in this dualistic universe and it's just bound to happen. I've been wondering why he chose me to be the one to do this. Did I have any kind of an association with him in a past life? He says the reason why is not because of any past karmic associations. This is Dolores Cannon's question. Like, she wants to know if she has any past life connections to Nostradamus. But because of the various people that he could see in future times that had this sort of connection with this plane in regards to the various pathways of time and the various dimensions of time and the way they interact. You were the most strategically located. Others are also located well, but he'd rather communicate it to one person through one person if possible. Thus, he could concentrate his energy on putting the information through rather than having to disperse his energy by trying to establish communication. He says the way you're located, you're involved with this work, plus you are in contact with souls with the type of mentality that could handle the information and communicate it clearly. So it will be exposed to the world for others to learn. In the beginning, he really surprised me when I was speaking to a student, Dionysus, and he came through. So Dionysus was the past life that the first channeler, the first vehicle of communication to reveal these prophecies was with Dolores Cannon. But complications came in her life, she had to move, and she never saw Dolores Cannon again. So that's why she was the bridge that acted as... She was the bridge. So he says, yes. He says that due to the nature of your work, this was necessary to establish primary contact with you, for he knew you would never have known that this vehicle could be used in this sort of communication unless he had contact with you through the established channels you were accustomed to. It seemed to be such a strange way of doing it that the odds were against it succeeding. He says only if you're rational about it. If you can rely on your intuition and see the pathways of time as he can see them, he says it's working out just right, just the way he had seen that it would work out. Did he ever try to contact people in other time periods and get these messages through to them? The idea occurred to me that maybe he had contacted someone in every time period where he saw something happening. He says this is the major contact for this planet. He has contacted other people in the future time periods, not because this has failed, but because these other people in these other time periods are on other planets. He wanted to try to disperse the information to these people who also have knowledge of his writings to help clarify the information there too. He says he had been in contact with the others, which are the Watchers, and they were interested in his writings and his visions because he could see things for them too. And he would send them quatrains we don't know of here, for they don't have to do anything with this world, but with their planet instead. Then he wasn't just concerned with our world. I know when this information comes out, there will be many imitators and many people who will say they're also in contact with Nostradamus, but he said he was not contacting through anyone else. That's correct. He says that to contact through several channels would be, would disperse his energy so the communication would not be as clear and there would be conflicting results. Knowing human nature, other people will come forth and say they're also in contact with him. There will be others who will come forth and say, oh, but this is what Nostradamus has revealed to me. And he says these people are acting on their own delusions. And most of them will be religious fanatics of various sorts. I believe we have more than enough proof already that we are truly in contact with him. He says there's no such thing as sufficient proof when you're dealing with a true skeptic. He says the books will be published. He really doesn't care if the skeptics believe or not, because his main desire is to get to those who are open-minded to thinking about the events coming to pass and having a different way of looking at them. He says one or more of these thinkers will be in a position to do something about it, and some of the decisions they will make will be colored by what they have read in your book. He says it will be sufficient to alter the events toward favorable outcomes. That is the book, and yes, I actually do believe that they were contacting the actual Nostradamus, because if you are self-aware and are aware of all the things that I'm aware of, you will know that something such as simultaneous time occurs and is real and is currently going on. So yes, we can access that time travel